Well, welcome everybody, Facebook friends. We want to welcome you, and then we also want to welcome a very special guest to Radio Merchant, the region's largest South Asian radio station, also aired in Philadelphia and Baltimore. And we have today with us North Carolina State Treasurer Dale Folwell. So we want to thank the Treasurer. Mr. Treasurer, thank you for being with us today. And this is aired on 99.9 FM, HD4, 1490 AM, and 101.9 FM. So it's going to be a very informal discussion, but Dale, thank you for being with us. We know you're a busy man.
Well, thank you for having me, and I know that we'll have an opportunity to talk and brag really about North Carolina's financial strength. And for your listeners in other states, North Carolina is no different than their states. We're all, as a lot of attention's been placed on how to flatten the healthcare curve, now all the focus is how to flatten the economic curve that's facing not just North Carolina, but every state.
Fantastic. First of all, I just say that we're glad that that you're okay. You actually contracted COVID-19, but from our heart to yours, we're just glad that you and your family are okay. Was that must have been a pretty scary experience, obviously, right? To get that virus so early.
Well, it was. And, for the longest time, Steve, I'm the only person anybody had ever heard of who had COVID-19, because this was late March. And then for the longest time, I was the only person anybody had heard of who was in intensive care with it. And then for the longest time, I was the only person anybody had ever heard of who is over the age of 60 with an A blood type who actually survived it. So, and now, people, Steve, hear this word asymptomatic, and they really don't know what that looks like. Well, they're looking at it right now. Never in this process did I have a shortness of breath, GI issues, lost a taste, lost a smell, headache, or a fever.
Wow.
But my lungs were as white as the collar of my shirt, which means my body was rejecting oxygen. So in the spirit of the old Jamie Johnson song of 7 years ago, you should have seen it in color. I've seen COVID-19 in color.
Well, we're glad you're well, and we're glad that you're back on the job. So tell us, for those listening, this can, just for a really high level overview before we dive into, I think, some of the issues you've laid out, which I think is perfect timing because we're in the middle of a pandemic, talking about retirement, savings and all those kinds of things. But walk us through real quickly at a high level, what does the State Treasurer's Office do for all of us listening today?
Well, the State Treasurer's Office in North Carolina is uniquely structured. As Harlan Bowles said in his book, which was co-authored by Charles Heatherly, on page 143, State Treasurer has more constitutional and statutory responsibilities than any other elected official in the state except for the governor. And I asked Charles, as well as Treasurer Bowles' son one time, why that last comment, and it had to do with the governor has command of the National Guard, and obviously that's a huge responsibility. But the State Treasurer has, we have 21 major statutory and constitutional responsibilities and duties, like chairing the State Banking Commission, which regulates all the state chartered banks and savings and loans in North Carolina, chair of the Debt Affordability Commission, which regulates and guides the amount of debt the state can use, chair of the and sole fiduciary of the 26th largest pool of public money in the world, which is the State Pension Plan, State Retirement Board, the State and Local Government Finance Division, which you're very familiar with, Councilman, as a city council person in Morrisville. When Morrisville needs to borrow money on a tax-free basis, they go through the LGC. The Supplemental Retirement Plan, the State Health Plan Board, and those are just about 8 of the 21 major duties and responsibilities of the State Treasurer. And for your listeners that are out of state, about half the states, I believe, the State Treasurer is elected, half of them they're appointed. And then the duties of the State Treasurer, whether especially in Pennsylvania versus North Carolina versus South Carolina, are very different.
So, okay, yeah. So you basically, you now manage, your office manages the state health plan. You're in charge of the retirement, like you said, for council members, law enforcement with the LGC, and investment strategy, correct? So what is it like right now during the pandemic to deal with all of these very complex issues? Because you've got retirement, how are we looking on that front? How are we looking with healthcare? What is keeping you up at night right now as our state treasurer?
Well, what's keeping me up at night is number one, that my fear of the potential that this virus has on expanding, in many cases, the economic inequalities that exist in North Carolina. And my point of saying that is specific to rural North Carolina, but especially eastern rural North Carolina, between where you and I are sitting right now and the Atlantic Ocean. We have two cities in the southern part of our state that your listeners are familiar with. One's called Charlotte and one's called Charlotte. I can tell you that even though they're spelled and sound similar, Charlotte and Charlotte, one being rural and one being urban, are in far different boats today. So that fear, especially as many of these communities have not only depopulated over the last 20 years, but also the average income within that remaining population has gone down. That's a big concern as the state treasurer and the keeper of the public purse. Specific to your question about the pension plan, we just crossed the $108 billion level, never achieved in the history of North Carolina. It's several billion dollars ahead of where it was at the high water mark between Valentine's and St. Patrick's Day of this year. And 10 or 11 months ago, before any of us had ever heard of COVID-19, this pension plan was designated in one of their categories by Moody's as being the #1 pension plan in the country in terms of its ability to continue to be funded during an economic downturn. Who could have predicted that we would have faced what we faced even since St. Patrick's Day of this year? So for all of those out there that teach, protect, and otherwise serve, this pension plan is in great shape. And even though that 90% of our employees here at the Office of State Treasurer are working remotely, we remain in the check delivering business to those who have taught, have protected, and who have otherwise served.
Okay, I mean, that's a great answer. And in the midst of a pandemic, let's talk about the state health plan. So, I mean, obviously you've got, coronavirus. We're at an 8% positive rate still. The numbers go down, then they come up. We're about 18th in the country. So, and we want to pray for all those families. I once heard you speak at a League of Municipalities event which really stood out at me. You're a good speaker. You said that there'll be one less seat at the family table. And this was before COVID, whether it's someone in the family dying, but so many people dead from this virus in North Carolina. What is it like being the treasurer now, dealing with a healthcare system that is really in a state of shock in terms of just dealing with testing, PPE? I know that your office has been doing some stuff with PPE in the state agencies. Could you talk a little bit about that, sir?
Be glad to. The remark that you remember when I spoke to the North Carolina League of Municipalities, who I have a great partnership and working relationship with, was referring to those that are killed in the line of duty. As I said during that speech, I can't tell you the day, but I can tell you what I said was that, at the treasurer's office, we're in the check delivery business. We can have a great intellectual conversation about commas and assumed rates of returns and AAA bond ratings and life expectancies. But at the end of the day, we are in the business of delivering checks. And no one calls the state treasurer's office in North Carolina to book a cruise. They call Steve because they've had a life-changing event. Most are blessed and some aren't. They've gotten a job at the county, the city, or the state. They've retired from a job. They've gotten a job and they've lost their job. They've gotten a job and they've been killed in the line of duty. And this most often happens with law enforcement, but it also, as you know, vividly, it happens in all kinds of public service work across North Carolina. They've gotten married. They've gotten divorced. They've lost a spouse. They've gotten married, had children aged out of the state health plan when they're 26. That's my little way of telling you that, and your viewers and listeners, that we are in the check delivery business and we deal with people who have had life-changing events, and we need to approach it that way. We don't pick and choose which laws to apply or who to apply them to. So I just wanted to say that regarding the other, your original remark. But, as we move forward, my job is very simple. To exercise the loyalty and duty of care to those that teach, those that protect, and those that otherwise serve, and taxpayers like them who fund these plans. And it's sometimes it's not easy, but it's very simple about where our loyalties lie. And specific to the state health plan, the Board of Trustees has supported the initiatives of both myself and the executive director to pay for all COVID-related illnesses and treatments and testing. Fortunately, or unfortunately, that decision was made by the board before I got sick, I believe. I had no idea that that was going to happen. But I want to tell you that that's been very important. And I say this in a very gender-based way. And most of the fingers are pointing back to men like myself. You know, we're just men in some respects, starting with Folwell men. We're just not inclined to take ourselves to the doctor. Women have a much better track record and antenna about taking care of themselves. Men are more stubborn, so to speak. So my point of saying that to you, we want to remove all the financial, mental, and psychological barriers of our public employees to make sure that there was no disincentive toward them getting tested and getting the treatment they needed for COVID-19.
Well, we thank you for that. We have a few more minutes with you. Just so much to cover. I guess my next question is, and this came in through chat, but you know, you bring a unique perspective. You've been in the legislature, the General Assembly. You were also ran the Department of Employment Security, if I'm correct, right? Commerce, and then became the state treasurer. So, what is your perspective, having worn those different hats, of the economy right now in North Carolina? Unemployment at its highest. People still filing for unemployment. Federal unemployment has run out. I got to be honest with you. Even in Morrisville, people are getting beyond anxious. They're really concerned. And even John Chambers, former CEO of Cisco, who I'm hosting on next week at the Startup Summit virtually, has said that he's from my home state of West Virginia, that it could be another, mid 2021 before we see signs of a recovery. So as someone on the Council of State, what do we need to be doing, all of us together, to get ourselves back on track?
Well, this comment is procedural and not political. The Council of State needs to convene. They need to convene in person. They need to have conversations for as long as it takes to address what's really on people's minds and hearts right now. And you just mentioned it, Steve. Job, health, food, and now educational insecurity, the likes of which we've never seen in our lifetime. I hope I get invited back after using this word, but people really don't give a damn what political party you're a member of. They just want their problems solved. And their problems are job, health, food, and educational insecurity. So I would say that in addition to all the things that you've mentioned, I was on the school board in Forsyth County for 8 years. And, being on a school board, you are closest emotionally, physically, financially, than as a public servant than any other elected official in the United States. But before that, I was a blue collar worker who made my living the hard way for a great number of years with my hands and my back and my feet, which ultimately at an older age changed my heart about the need to educate my mind. And I say all that to you because a lot of the tools and principles that I need, no pun intended, are things that I developed and learned through nurture as a motorcycle mechanic and a garbage collector. When you're a motorcycle mechanic and you work at Young Harley-Davidson in Greensboro or Honda Winston-Salem in Winston-Salem, you roll something up on the lift and you listen, you act, and you fix. And that's what I've always tried to do as a public servant, is attack problems and not people. And as you've already pointed out, there's lots of anxiety and problems out there in our world right now. But the biggest problem is simply this: we've lost our ability to challenge assumptions. Anytime that you challenge an assumption on any topic, it's called political. And what we need is more transparency, more data, more ability to challenge assumptions, more consistent policies, with the idea that one size may fit none.
We really appreciate that. For those of you listening on Radio Murchie, we've had with us Dale Folwell, the North Carolina State Treasurer. We're going to end the radio portion and continue for a few minutes in our town hall, which is being streamed on our social media. But we want to thank you for listening. We want to thank the Treasurer for taking time out of his busy schedule to be with us. Mr. Treasurer, before we get off the radio, where can they go to learn about the Treasurer's office? Can you just give us that URL, please?
Well, they go to nctreasurer.com. And of course, one of the most popular parts of our website is the nccash.com. Now, the actual word is the escheats fund, but I used to stutter, so I'm advised not to use the word escheats too often in a sentence. But, you know, for your listeners in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and otherwise, every state has an nccash.com equivalent. And that's where people can go and look up their name, their maiden name, their kids' names, their parents' names. And I guarantee you, especially in North Carolina, your odds are better than playing the lottery. We have 11 million records and 10 million citizens. So that may be just another valuable reason to tune into your show.
Okay, well, thank you for being with us, everybody on Radio Murchie. We're going to be rebroadcasting this sometime next week. A lot of people coming on the radio. It's been busy, but we want to thank Radio Murchie for hosting this. We're going to continue for a few more minutes with the State Treasurer. You've done a great job answering my questions. My question now has to do with cities. So the thing is, I hope eventually I move to some different offices, but I really do like my role because I am closest to the people in Morrisville, which is one of the fastest growing cities, driving innovation, driving technology strategy. I mean, cities are just absolutely being devastated, Dale. I mean, you know, sales tax revenues down by 14% or more. Businesses closing shop. I think next year in our budget, not just in Morrisville, all across the state. So what can we do as cities? There's really, I guess the Treasurer's office can be supportive in terms of we want to float more bonds to pay for roads, infrastructure, which is an issue right now that we're all dealing with given where DOT is. Do you have any insight just as a policymaker of the things that we need to be thinking about in North Carolina on those issues?
Well, as anxious as you were when you were giving a snapshot of what you see in Morrisville, let me really take you over the edge. Imagine that you were in a city or a county in North Carolina where the sales tax revenue was down 26% this year. That the amount of land in that county doesn't pay any property tax. And the number of citizens in that county is about equal to Myers Park High School in Charlotte in terms of faculty and student population. Think about that calculus. And Morrisville obviously has some headwinds and some challenges, but just think about what I just described to you. And that's going on in a lot of cities and counties across North Carolina, especially in rural North Carolina. And the first thing we need to do is acknowledge what's happened in many of these communities over the last 20 years. As North Carolina has populated, some of these communities have depopulated, but more importantly, the average income in these communities has gone down. And both of those things can be very toxic to the continued operation of a city who has the ultimate responsibility on public safety, public works, and to some extent public roads. So this is a very big issue that I partner very closely with Paul Meyer at the School of Government, actually Kevin Leonard at the County Commissioner Association of North Carolina, as well as the School of Government, and with close contact, as you can imagine, with Greg Gaskins and now Sharon Edmondson at the our Treasurer's State and Local Government Finance Division. And you know, sometimes when people come in to borrow money through us, we use the word no. But oftentimes, Steve, they hear that as they think it's spelled N-O. We spell no K-N-O-W. So anytime that we try to work with a city and explain to them that they may be living a little bit beyond their means in terms of their ability to pay down debt, for example, or pay off debt, We need to let them know, KNOW, why we feel the way that we do. I can tell you that with the difference of opinion among the viewers and listeners to your show, that I can absolutely assure you that there's one thing that they agree on 100%. And that is that if any government agency has to borrow money for public education, public safety, public roads, or public works, that they're able to do that at the lowest possible interest rates. And credit score to me from a rating agency is like a, bond rating to me is like a credit score to you, like a sanitation grade to a restaurant. It's a sign of quality. And all your listeners agree with the fact that if you're going to borrow money, you do it at the lowest possible interest rate, so that way you can get more of whatever it is you're buying. But more importantly, these rating agencies who give these ratings are very interested in any community that is watching the pennies and the paper clips. And they're also highly interested that if you have to borrow money, obviously you have to have some plan for paying it back. But if you have to dip into reserves, you need to have some plan for paying that back also. And that gives me an opportunity to applaud the City Council of Morrisville and the local management team of the City of Morrisville. The statewide average of the amount of money that cities like yours has in reserve across North Carolina is 25%.
Yeah.
Your city has not one, not two, but 3 times that amount in reserves. Over 75% of 1 year's budget at the City of Morrisville is in reserves. So my reason for taking so long to explain that is that you just got to keep doing what you have been doing, which is watching the pennies and the paper clips.
Yeah, and be conservative fiscally. And we only have a few more minutes left. I mean, I think for us, transportation is a big issue cities are dealing with the DOT down over 500 million, people aren't driving. So that's an issue. So I foresee when things do get back to a new normal, more bonds being floated just for transportation. Whoever the governor is, we need, I think, a transportation bond where we can invest in roads and continue to invest in technology. So I just had a technology guy just text me saying, we want the treasurer to know that, you know, using AI and automation and digital technologies to the extent you can to give that customer a really good experience. They're already getting it when they call in on a retirement system. And you have a great IT team there. I want to give a shout out to Bill Golden, and he's a Steelers fan like me. So he actually gave me a Steelers book a couple of months ago, and I hope we're both Steelers fans. But you got a great team out there, and they're doing really good stuff, you know, just in terms of keeping up with all the changing technology. Because it's, you know, technology can really be used to help, given the fact that I'm in the industry, can really be used to help the customer. You know?
Well, and, you know, as the keeper of the public purse and who's in the check delivery business, and I normally don't talk about personnel, but since you mentioned Bill's name, I mean, it's just an example that everything I've said to you and your listeners and your viewers is I'm standing on the shoulders of somebody like him. He worked for the previous administration, and possibly the previous administration, as well as a lot of people at the Treasurer's office. And as at the end of the day, you know, as I said earlier, we're in the check delivery business, and especially when it comes to technology, I know what I don't know. That's how I've got to be the treasurer, that I always look for opportunities for new information or a better way of looking at old information. And Bill and so many at the treasurer's office and so many subject matter areas always provide that to me. And I'm very thankful to be standing on their shoulders.
Well, I know that our former mayor, who's one of my best friends, Mark Stolman, always says hi. And I was his mayor pro tem for a few years, and he did a good job keeping us on track fiscally. We could go for another hour. I mean, I don't know how to stop. I mean, I got so many questions going on in my head, but we can bring you back. But
sure.
Thank you for that you do, everything that you do, and thank you for being on Radio Murchie. And the final point I'll leave you with is that one law enforcement officer, whom I shall not name, who's in lowest local jurisdiction, just wanted me to thank you for what you do to help their retirement. But in this situation, this individual hurt their neck and back, and they don't have enough saved up to help deal with their healthcare costs. So I told them that this is something that you're working on, and we just have, if people have something that they want to do, they can just email the treasurer on the account, on the website there, and he'll get back to you. I mean, so, you know, but thank you for helping those in the line of duty. That's why.
Well, I'm sorry for the this person's injury, but just to say that in addition to everything else we do, Steve, we do focus on being the low cost. And for example, our supplemental retirement 401, 403, and 457 plan was just, as well as the pension plan, was designated as the second most efficient in the United States of its type, and that means there's more money available for this LEO.
Thank you so much. Well, look, you've been very gracious with your time. We want to thank everyone for being with us today. Mr. Dale Folwell, Treasurer of North Carolina, will bring you back. And thank you for, we're glad you're healthy. Stay that way. And thanks for your service to the public, and be safe. And we're all in this together. We're fighting a war right now on all fronts, and we got to be united to get through it. So thank you.
Well, I've got the energy of a teenager, and I hope I have that one next time I visit with you.
Thank you.